Lord of the Sword is an action-adventure game for the Sega Master System that I'd been skeptical about starting for a long time. The first time I fired it up, my face must have looked like the protagonists on the box art here because I was hardly impressed by what felt like a stiff, seemingly terrible action game. Even though it stayed on the shelf for a long time, with a little faith and a lot of perseverance, Lord of the Sword has actually turned out to be a net pleasant playthrough overall. The story of Lord of the Sword is simple. The throne of Balginia is up for grabs after evil creatures killed the king and his family to make way for their horrible demon lord called Ragon to assume the kingship. Elders of the land are scrambling to find a successor that could possibly defend against a takeover if necessary, so they put out a call for a hero to rise up and complete 3 tasks to prove his worth since the last guy with the king job clearly couldn't hold his ground. You play the game as Landau, a would-be hero vying for the crown. Not only is this story outlined well in the manual, but it's also reiterated in-game as a giant wall of text over several screens. It's nice and surprisingly coherent, but there are no nice visual story panels or cutscenes to enjoy, unfortunately. The game drops you into the town of Harfoot to start out your adventure. The land of Balginia is quite small overall, and is probably comparable in size and layout to something like Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. Towns and other locations are spread out with these action sequences in between, and getting from place to place is as easy as choosing a direction at a town's edge and fighting your way there. There are forks in the road that take you to different locations, which can be a little bit confusing at first, but I found exploring and making my own map in conjunction with the one in the manual to be pretty helpful. On the quest for clues about how to complete the 3 tasks, things are simplified compared to other games where there are tons of NPCs to sift through for a sliver of useful information. Here, most of the towns you visit only have a single open door with one very, very sad man inside to talk to. This person usually has 2 jobs: healing you if you talk to them over and over again, and providing you with potentially helpful information about how to advance the adventure. The plot progression is extremely linear, and I didn't find any examples where things could be done out of order. Talking to people will open up new events. Sometimes you'll talk to someone and think you're done with them since they'll just keep repeating the same thing to you, but you may actually have to talk to them 4 or 5 times to get a different message to move the plot along. It's annoying if you don't know this and feel stuck when you actually aren't, but once you know it, it's not so bad. In terms of clarity, hints given by these people in the first part of the game were extremely straightforward and helpful. The information was very direct about where to look next, and following up on these leads was almost always fruitful. About halfway through the game though, something weird happened. There was a distinct turning point in NPC interactions where I felt the cohesion of the game's plot and my understanding of it completely unraveled. This was caused entirely by being blatantly lied to on several occasions, which ground any momentum I felt in the first hour or so of playing to a halt. Here's an example. We know from the very beginning of the game that we have to burn the book we get from the wizard in the Mountain of Fire, and we find out from another townsperson that the mountain we need to go to is Mount Morgos. A man in Dwarrel eventually tells us that our weapons would not defeat the beast of Mount Morgos, so trusting he was telling me the truth, I went off on a wild goose chase to find a weapon upgrade. And guess what? You can fight the Mount Morgos beast just fine with your equipped weapon, and as far as I understand, there's no upgrade to be found until later on after plot-related checkpoints have been reached. This was the first of a long list of times that the game was deliberately misleading. From that point on, I got stuck in many circular leads and dead ends, and eventually my experience became one of those go everywhere and try everything situations, wandering from town to town and hoping anyone might guide me somewhere new. Even what I'd consider to be pretty good writing deteriorated as the game pressed on. Congratulations, thou hast done so much so soon was probably my favorite blunder of them all. Exploration in these kinds of games is usually something I look forward to because grinding enemies and searching new places usually rewards you with something for your trouble, like money for new equipment or experience to increase your character's stats. Lord of the Sword provides you with neither of these. There is no experience system in this game, and there aren't any shops to buy upgrades or other items to help you along your way. There are also no health replenishing items dropped from fighting enemies, so taking down various woodland creatures and flying eyeballs is just a drain on your very limited health resources and your will to succeed. At first, I thought this lack of character management was refreshing and genuinely enjoyed the simplicity for a while, but after being forced to wander aimlessly when NPCs started lying, I got frustrated having to kill the same enemies repeatedly while moving between the various towns and being no further ahead for it. And when I say repeatedly, I mean the exact same enemies appear in the exact same places each time you go down the same roads. It's monotonous. The manual even says to avoid enemies whenever possible, and insists that your test of courage is not to die, but to live long enough to become king. Incentivizing these battles would have gone a long way to make this whole game feel more enjoyable, since you spend so much time walking between towns, especially in a first playthrough. Enemies in this game can be hard to manage. They have relatively predictable patterns, but if you move through an area too quickly, you can spawn too many at once and get ganged up on. Slow and steady seems to be the best strategy most of the time, except for these screens where you can just walk right on through with most things moving around you. There's a whole mishmash of foes to fight, from your usual bats, snakes, and birds right up to humanoid beings like zombies, lizard men that look more like armadillos than anything else, Dagons, and Bandersnatches. Bandersnatches look like bipedal animals in the manual, but in the game they look more like a scary clown wearing a striped shirt. They definitely felt out of place to me. I think I also accidentally found a way to softlock the game with the book thieves. When they touch you, they steal the book you're holding until you kill them. If you happen to die when your book isn't in your inventory though, you can't seem to get it back from them or the wizard that gives it to you in the first place. I didn't test this extensively, but it did happen to me the first time I played and is a pretty big thing to overlook in playtesting. An aspect of this game that heightens the frustration levels to an all-time high is that you only have 10 continues for the whole game. This might seem like a lot, but even though they called them continues, once you lose all the life in your health bar, you're on to the next one, so they're really more like lives. They don't even let you know how many you have left, and the only way that you can tell that you can still continue after you die is if your cursor moves to that option when you're back on the start screen. If you're thinking that some upgrades might help, there are none. No defense upgrades, no ways to lengthen your health bar, and no way at all to get any new continues that I'm aware of. There isn't a save feature or a password system either, so it's a one-shot deal that needs to be completed from start to finish in one sitting. This forces you to learn the order of things to be done one painful mistake at a time, and to do them pretty much perfectly to even get close to the end of the game. On the topic of this game's weirdness, there are only a few upgrades to find, and they're all for your sword and bow. These only become available after killing certain enemies or talking to key characters. I'm not sure if it was meant to be a kick in the teeth coming so late in the game, but in one of the last sections you visit, there's an option to pick up a new sword. Before this moment, there had only been one other upgrade for the sword available, and the manual implies that there should be a second, so I grabbed it. What a fool I was! It was all a ruse. It actually decreases your attack power right in time for the final stretch. How nice. It's just like in Faxanadu when you pick up the pendant in the Tower of Suffer. I'm not sure if it's a bug or intentional, but it was really annoying to be handicapped like that in what is easily the most difficult part of the game. The boss fights, including the one against the final boss, are all over the place. Hitboxes are hard to figure out and feel pretty inconsistent, and it's not uncommon to be able to stand inside of a boss sprite and not take any damage sometimes. They're all pretty powerful and involve memorizing a pattern or two to take them down, but Landau's sprite is so enormous and he moves so stiffly that it's not easy to avoid taking damage anyway. Bosses also have no health bar and rarely flash when hit, so it's hard to even tell if you're hurting them. Occasionally you'll get an auditory cue, but sometimes you won't. It's a real crapshoot, but hammering away at them with your sword with your fingers crossed will usually do the trick. The clincher of all the fights had to be the rumble against what the manual calls the castle bodyguards. You have to fight 5 bosses in a row and somehow survive. The first 4 battlers are kind enough to engage in hand-to-hand combat with you, with their pathetic kicks and comedic sword flailings, but then this paladin brings a horse and a lance to a sword fight. It was hard to figure out where to hit this guy since his sprite is so big. It turns out that you have to hit him in the face, which felt great after I game overed on him the first time I fought him. The hint sheets provided by Sega tell you to aim at the tip of his lance, but that didn't work very well for me. I do have to say that in my case, the paladin fight was won with the help of some game glitches that came about during the battle. There was an extreme amount of slowdown all of a sudden, complete with some flashy new glitchy graphics in the upper left corner that allowed me to plan and execute my jumps and end this guy. This did happen another time I played, but not half as badly. Whether that was fair or not, I'll take it. I don't want to spoil the events leading up to the final boss encounter or the fight itself, but I just can't stay quiet on the biggest slap in the face that Lord of the Sword delivers. In most other games, once the final boss is defeated, you're triumphantly whisked away to some ending screens, maybe a cutscene or two, and some wonderful music to celebrate your victory, right? Not here. In this game, not only do you have to walk out of the dungeon you're in, but you also have to fight your way back to one of the castles to trigger the end of the game. I think I could have chewed through every single one of my nails doing this because I was so scared to run out of lives on the way there. To face a game over and land back at the beginning of the game at that point probably would have been enough to make me rage quit, and that's saying a lot. Lord of the Sword is best described as an experience. It's a test of patience and skill, a disjointed and convoluted adventure, and an exercise in memory and learning. It's probably one of the furthest things from something with replay value, but despite its lack of polish and all of its qualms, I think it's still worth playing just to experience something totally different on the Master System. It's rare to find a game that's so simple in its premise and just involves a guy on a journey with his trusty sword and bow. Finishing this game was a well-earned victory, and given this game's general attitude, it was no surprise that its final gift to me was a send-off with a grand middle finger.